During the company meeting, my boss hugged my wife, his hand rested on her waist as if he had the right, as if that touch was natural, as if I weren't there, as if my presence meant absolutely nothing. Her laugh echoed, light, sweet, a laugh that hadn't been mine for a long time, but I insisted on ignoring the signs. Maybe it was cowardice, maybe it was love, maybe it was the desperate desire to believe that some things are sacred. But there, at that moment, in front of everyone, the truth hit me like a punch in the stomach. The air became heavy, the blood pounded in my head, and before I could stop myself, my voice broke the silence. What nonsense is going on here? It's all over between us. You just destroyed our family. The silence that followed was piercing, eyes turned to me, some surprised, others uncomfortable, as if I were the invader, as if I were the one in the wrong for refusing to be a passive spectator of my own humiliation. Her hand slid away from his body, her eyes widened, and for a second, a single second, I saw panic. Not regret, not shame, just the fear of being caught. And that hurt more than anything else. Baby, please, it's not what it seems. The classic, predictable, empty phrase. I laughed. A dry laugh, without humor, without heat, without life. Isn't that what it looks like? My voice echoed in the hall. Then explain to me what it is. Explain to everyone here what that means, because honestly, I'd love to know. The boss was silent. He wasn't a man of many words, but now, his mouth remained sealed, his gaze averted, his posture rigid. He didn't need to say anything. The truth was there, wide open, dripping poison onto my skin. I could feel the looks of pity, the commotion starting, people exchanging whispers, moving away as if they were witnessing an accident about to happen. But I didn't care. At that moment, there was only one thing inside me, the bitter taste of betrayal. The last few months have gone by like a flash in my mind. The lame excuses, the messages that she left the room to answer, the showers that took too long, the sudden tiredness, the lack of patience, the growing distance, the nights spent facing the opposite side of the bed. I saw the signs. My God, how I saw it. But I ignored them because love is also allowing yourself to be blind. But now, the light was too bright for me to continue pretending I couldn't see. Not here, please. Let's talk at home. There will be no conversation. My words cut off any attempt by her to smooth over the situation. There is no more home. You chose. You made your decision when you decided to cross that line. When you decided to turn me into an idiot in front of everyone. You destroyed everything. She tried to get closer, touch my arm, but I moved away. Feeling your skin on mine at that moment was like touching a hot fire. A pain that burned, that consumed. Her eyes began to shine, but it wasn't regret. It was despair. The desperation of someone who realized, too late, that their sandcastle was crumbling. Please, her voice faltered. I love you. And then I knew there was nothing more to say. Because true love does not share space with betrayal. It is not divided between two mouths, between two bodies. Love is not hidden, between excuses and weak justifications. If she had loved me, she wouldn't have made me feel like I was disposable. My vision was blurred, but not with tears, because I wouldn't cry there, I wouldn't shed a single drop for someone who didn't know how to value me. But out of anger. An anger that boiled, that screamed, that wanted to explode in all directions. The boss finally opened his mouth. I think we'd better talk later, there's no need to make a fuss. I turned to him, every muscle in my body tense. Scandal? Do you want me to stay calm? After all that? I got closer, enough for him to feel the weight of my presence. If I were you, I would be very quiet. Because the last thing you want right now is to piss me off more than you already have. The entire hall was frozen. Employees watched from afar, some holding cell phones, perhaps filming, perhaps waiting for it to become more chaos. But I wouldn't put on that show. Not there. Not for them. Without saying another word, without looking back, I walked away. The last thing I heard was the sound of her muffled sobs in the room, but it no longer mattered. She lost me. She lost everything. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that her real hell was just beginning. And the most ironic of all, the boss never intended to be with her. In the end, after destroying our family, she discovered that she was just another one. Now tell me, who is the real betrayed in this story? Welcome to the channel where the truth about cheating is exposed without filters. Here, we do not support and never romanticize infidelity. The stories are fictional, but the pain, consequences and lessons are very real. Our goal is to show how betrayal destroys lives, families and leaves irreversible marks. Get ready for a story shocking, intense and full of twists. Listen until the end, because some truths can only be felt on the skin. Alex had always been a dedicated man, both to his career and his family. From the moment he met Laura, he felt like his life was finally complete. She was everything he ever wanted, intelligent, charming and with a smile that lit up any room. They built a life together, a story full of moments that seemed like something out of a romantic movie. The impromptu candlelit dinners, the spontaneous trips to neighboring cities, the lazy Sundays on the couch watching movies that they had already seen 1,000 times, but that, together, always felt new. Their marriage was a reflection of years of complicity and respect. At least that's what Alex believed. The two met at college, still young, full of dreams and with that passion that only those who experience their first love can understand. Laura was determined, with an ambition that made her an admirable woman, always with plans for the future, always looking for something more. Alex, on the other hand, had a more serene outlook on life. I liked the stability, knowing exactly where I was going. Over time, these differences never seemed like a problem. On the contrary, they balanced each other. When he hesitated, she pushed him forward. When she got lost in her own daydreams, he brought her back to the present. They built a family based on this dynamic, with a comfortable home, a well-established routine and a marriage that, at least for Alex, was solid. He saw Laura as his life partner, someone he could count on through good and difficult days. Still, over the past few months, something has felt slightly off. Nothing so obvious, nothing he could point to as a concrete problem. They were just details, a diverted look, two short answers, a certain distance that he tried to ignore. Maybe it was just the stress of work, he told himself. Laura had always been extremely dedicated to her career, and her recent promotion took more time and energy than ever before. She worked in the administrative sector of a large company, while Alex was an engineer. Their daily lives were often busy, but they always found time for each other. Or at least that's how it used to be. Now, Laura arrived late more often, always citing endless meetings or tight deadlines. The tiredness showed on his face, and Alex did his best to lighten the weight of his responsibilities at home. He would prepare dinner when she arrived exhausted, massage her shoulders when he noticed she was tense, or simply leave her alone, respecting her space. But, little by little, he began to feel that the space he respected was growing more than it should have. Conversations began to become scarce. Before, they spent hours talking about the day, about plans for the future, about trivial things that were only funny because they were shared. Now, Laura's every response seemed calculated, without depth. The moments of affection also decreased. The goodnight kiss became automatic, mechanical. The touch no longer carried the same heat as before. Still, Alex refused to believe anything could be wrong. He loved Laura, and Laura always loved him. That's what he held on to. When they started to build a life together, they promised that they would never let routine wear down what they had. So maybe it was just a phase. Maybe it was the weight of responsibilities, the wear and tear of everyday life. He just needed to find a way to rekindle the flame. And that's exactly why he planned a special weekend. Nothing elaborate, just the two of them, away from work, problems, distractions. A refuge to remember why they are together. But when he suggested the idea, Laura hesitated. She said she would love to, but that she didn't know if she could take the time now, that she was overwhelmed and that maybe it would be better to leave it for another time. Her tone was gentle, but there was something behind those words that made Alex's stomach turn. He didn't insist, he just smiled and agreed. That night was another one of those moments when silence took over between the two. Laura went to bed early, without many words, while Alex remained on the sofa for longer than usual, staring at the television without really paying attention to what was going on. There was something there, something he couldn't define, but that made every detail scream to him that things were changing. Still, he refused to give room for doubt. Their love was real. It always was. So, he decided that he needed to be more present, demonstrate more, rekindle what seemed to be fading away. The next day, he prepared breakfast for her, something simple, but made with care. When Laura came down the stairs, surprised, she smiled in a way that for a brief moment made Alex forget all his insecurities. "That's beautiful, love. Thanks." She sat down and the two talked a little, more lightly than recently. For a moment, Alex believed that everything would go back to normal, that maybe he was just imagining things. But then her cell phone vibrated on the table. A message. Laura quickly picked up the device and turned the screen down, almost automatically. Something inside Alex twisted. It was such a small reflection, so subtle, but full of meaning. He pretended he didn't see, swallowed hard and changed the subject. He didn't want to doubt the woman he loved. The days continued to pass. The routine took its course, but that shadow of uncertainty hung over him like a cloud about to collapse. Work kept him busy, but his mind always went back to Laura, to the little details that he had previously ignored but now seemed to scream in his head. Deep down, he knew something was wrong, but the thought of confronting that truth was unbearable. He needed to believe that there was still time to save what they had. What Alex didn't know was that, soon, the truth would come out in the worst possible way. And when that happened, nothing would be the same again. In the days that followed, Alex felt a restlessness he couldn't name. It was as if something inside him was struggling, wanting to come out, wanting to force him to see what he stubbornly refused to see. Laura remained the same, at least on the surface. The smile on your face, the kind gestures, the impeccable routine. But it was in the small details that the truth began to crack the illusion he was trying to keep intact. Her cell phone was always facing down. The meetings became more frequent, and sometimes she didn't even return home at the time she said she would. The excuses were convincing, logical, flawless. But there was something about the way she gave them that made him feel a sour taste in his mouth, as if he were being fed well-trained words instead of sincerity. One night, Alex was on the couch waiting for Laura. The clock was almost midnight when she arrived. She opened the door carefully, as if she didn't want to wake him, but he had already been awake for hours, his chest tight, his mind spinning. He watched her enter, her hair slightly disheveled, her makeup hastily touched up. The scent was stronger than usual, and he knew, in that instant, that it wasn't the smell of his entire day at work. It was a recent perfume, applied minutes before, perhaps in the car, perhaps in the elevator. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, time stopped. "I stayed late at the office," she said, dropping her bag on the sideboard. Her voice was controlled, confident, but she didn't find the same confidence in Alex's eyes as always. He just nodded. "Everything is fine." He wanted to ask. I wanted to pressure her. He wanted to say that he knew something was wrong, that he could smell the deceit permeating her, but he held back. He forced a smile, a reflection of a man trying desperately to believe his wife was still the woman he loved. "Yes, I was just waiting for you to arrive." She smiled, but it was a quick smile, eager to change the subject. He went up the stairs without saying anything else. Alex remained there, his mind divided between certainty and hope. The days passed and distrust began to grow like a tumor. He noticed the moments when Laura walked away, when she closed herself in the bathroom with her cell phone in hand, when she answered messages that he pretended not to notice. His heart already knew the truth, but his mind fought against it, refused to accept it without proof. Until one night, while she was sleeping next to him, her cell phone vibrated. Alex didn't want to be that man. The man who searches, who lowers himself, who searches for evidence as if the truth was not printed before him. But he needed to know. I needed to see it. His hand shook as he grabbed her cell phone from the bedside table. The still-lit screen displayed a message. A name. A short, casual sentence, but it carried the weight of an earthquake. I missed you today. The air left his lungs. The ground seemed to slip away from beneath his feet. He clicked on the conversation, swiping up, reading messages that shouldn't be there. Sweet words. Hidden plans. Details that Laura never shared with him. Her boss's name was repeated. Each sentence was like a blade piercing his skin, and for a moment, he didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process that without feeling my world fall apart. Next to him, Laura slept peacefully, as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't just destroyed the man she promised to love. Alex got up from the bed, feeling his chest burning. He walked through the room, down the hallway, taking deep breaths to keep from exploding. I needed more. I needed to know where this was going. He needed the full truth, because at that moment, all he had were words typed on a screen. He needed to see them. He needed to see it with his own eyes. Over the next few days, he observed Laura with new eyes. Leaves from work that were once normal were now obvious. The moments when she checked her cell phone and smiled sideways were now proof. The rush to get ready on days when he said he would stay late at the office burned in his mind. Every detail, previously ignored, now formed a clear picture of the betrayal. And then he decided. That Friday, when Laura said she would stay at the office late, Alex didn't argue. He didn't question it. He just watched her get ready, put on perfume, choose her clothes with more care than she used to. He watched her leave, taking a taxi instead of driving. He waited a few minutes before grabbing his keys and following her. The way to a discreet restaurant was quick, and when he got there, he stopped on the other side of the street, his heart beating so hard that he felt the blood pulsing in his ears. And that's when he saw it. Laura entered and, a few minutes later, her boss arrived. The man sat across from her, smiling, and she smiled back in a way she hadn't smiled at Alex in months. The conversation flowed naturally between them, the intense looks, the subtle touches. Time seemed to slow down as Alex watched the scene, his body paralyzed, his mind refusing to believe what he saw. But there was no longer any doubt. There was no more room for denial. Laura was there, in front of him, experiencing a love that was no longer theirs. A love he didn't recognize. Alex felt his chest tighten, but he didn't back away. He stood there, watching, feeling the betrayal sink into his skin like a hot iron. He could have left. He could have closed himself off from that truth, pretended he didn't see it. But no. He needed to be there. He needed to commit every detail to memory, because when the moment came, when he confronted Laura, he wanted her to know that he saw it. That he knew. That her lie wasn't as cleverly hidden as she thought. And then, when Laura held her boss's hand across the table and laughed at something he said, as if she were in love, Alex knew his life would never be the same. But what Laura didn't know was that that night didn't just mark the end of a marriage. It marked the beginning of something much bigger. Something she could never predict. Alex felt his blood boil inside him. After days of silence, absorbing every detail of Laura's betrayal, he knew he could no longer delay it. There would be no calm conversation, no rationalization. He wanted answers, he wanted to see in her eyes the confession she was still trying to hide. The house was silent when he arrived that night. Laura was in the living room, cell phone in hand, distracted. As soon as she noticed her husband's presence, she looked up, surprised by his hard expression. "We need to talk." The words came out firmly, with no room for hesitation. Laura hesitated for a moment, but put down her cell phone and made herself comfortable on the sofa. What it was? "You've been acting strange for days." Anger bubbled inside Alex, but he kept it under control. He walked slowly to the dining table, where he placed his keys, his jacket and, finally, the envelope he had prepared. Laura observed the gesture, her brow furrowed. "Open." She blinked, confused, but picked up the envelope and ran her fingers along the edge, pulling out the papers inside. As soon as he saw the photos, the color drained from his face. The records were clear, crisp. She and the boss, sitting in the restaurant, their hands clasped on the table. She laughing, him looking at her with an intimacy that no one could deny. Another photo showed the two leaving the restaurant together, getting into the same car. The silence was suffocating. Laura seemed petrified, as if she was still trying to find an excuse that would make it less real. "That's not what you think," he murmured, but his voice broke mid-sentence. Alex laughed, but it was a humorless, lifeless laugh. "Isn't that what I think? So explain it to me, Laura. Explain to me why my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was with another man," laughing as if she had forgotten that she had a husband at home. She swallowed hard, her eyes desperately searching for something, anything, that could give her a way out. But there was no way out. The truth was there, exposed, tearing up any chance of hiding behind empty excuses. It was a mistake, Alex." He ran his hands through his hair, laughing again, not believing that that was all she had to say. "A mistake. As if I had bumped into someone on the street, as if it were something accidental. A mistake." His voice came out stronger, deeper. "You call that a mistake? A mistake happens once, Laura. But this," he took his cell phone from his pocket, unlocked it and scrolled through the screen to the conversation he had read nights ago. "This was not a mistake. That was a choice." The cell phone shook in his hand as he showed her the screen. Laura was silent, reading the messages she had sent herself. The eyes filled with tears, but Alex no longer saw sadness there, just despair. I didn't want to hurt you." Those words hit him harder than any punch could. He slammed his palm on the table, feeling his heart hammering in his chest. "Didn't you want to hurt me? You destroyed me, Laura. You made me look like a fool. All these months, all these excuses, all these meetings. While I was here, thinking you were tired, trying to be a good husband, you were with him." She lowered her head, tears streaming down her face, but he didn't feel sorry. He felt nothing but a piercing pain and a hatred that grew inside him with every second. "Alex, please, I know I messed up, but I love you." "No. You don't love me. You don't do that to someone you love. You betrayed me, deceived me, and now you want to throw these words around as if they could erase everything." He took a step back, looking at her as if he were seeing a stranger. "Tell me something, Laura. Did he promise you anything? Promised you a future?" She looked up, and the panic he saw in her eyes was what sealed everything. There was the answer he didn't yet have. She didn't just cheat on him. She destroyed what they had for something that didn't even exist. "He's not going to stay with you, is he?" His voice was a whisper filled with irony. "You destroyed our family for a man who doesn't really want you." Laura covered her face with her hands, sobbing, but Alex no longer felt anything but an immense emptiness. "He broke up with you, didn't he?" She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. The truth was there, stamped in every gesture, in every tear. "My God, you threw everything away and didn't even keep the prize." The weight of that realization hit him hard. He felt his body shudder, as if he had finally absorbed everything that had happened. For a moment, silence reigned in the room. Laura cried softly, while Alex remained there, motionless, feeling unrecognizable within his own skin. And then, he took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what I needed to do. He picked up the keys from the table, looked at Laura one last time, and then walked to the door. I hope it was worth it. And with that, he left, leaving behind everything that had once been his home, but which was now nothing more than a scene where lies and betrayal had destroyed everything. Alex left the house without looking back. The cold night air hit his face, but he barely felt it. His mind was on fire, burning with everything that had just happened. He drove aimlessly, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His breathing was heavy, ragged, and his chest rose and fell with the anger that still pulsed inside him. Every detail, every word Laura said replayed in his head, as if his own brain was trying to torture him. He needed a place to think, a space away from that house, away from the smell of it, away from the memory of what they were and what they would never be again. He stopped the car in an empty parking lot, turned off the engine and stood there, staring into space. His mind was spinning, but all he could feel was betrayal digging into his skin like a sharp blade. His phone vibrated on the bench next to him. He looked at the screen and saw Laura's name shining. The jaw locked. He didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want any more empty explanations. He ignored the call, but the phone vibrated again. And again. An incessant sequence of calls that only increased his hatred. When he finally stopped, he let out a heavy sigh and laid his head back against the back of the seat. Minutes later, a new message appeared on the screen. Please go home. We need to talk. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. To talk. Now. After everything. There was no more conversation to be had. He already had all the answers. And even so, something inside him wanted to see the end of that story up close. He needed to see how she would deal with the consequences of what she did. He started the car and drove back, but without rushing. I wanted her to feel the weight of waiting, to sit alone in the house where she had destroyed everything. When he finally parked, he took a deep breath before getting out. His entire body was tense, but his mind was cold. When he entered, he found Laura sitting on the sofa, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her face was a mixture of guilt, fear and despair. You're back, she murmured, as if afraid of his reaction. Say what you have to say, he replied, crossing his arms. His voice was low, emotionless. She took a deep breath, searching for words. I know I hurt you, and there's nothing I can say that will change that. But, Alex, I never wanted it to be like this. He narrowed his eyes. And how exactly did you want it to be, Laura? Did you want me to never find out? Did you want to keep cheating on me while I fooled myself into thinking our lives were perfect? She swallowed hard. I made a wrong choice. I let myself be carried away by something that meant nothing. It didn't mean anything. He took a step forward, feeling the anger return. So you destroyed our marriage for nothing? Her lips trembled, and more tears fell. But Alex didn't feel sorry. No more. I was lost, she confessed, her voice cracking. I felt like something was missing in me, and I looked in the wrong place. I know I was selfish, that I hurt you in a way that may never be healed. But I never stopped loving you. He let out a bitter laugh. You don't love anyone but yourself, Laura. If he loved, he wouldn't have done what he did. If you loved me, you would have respected me. Silence fell between the two. She wiped her tears with the back of her hands, her body shaking. And now? His voice was weak, almost like a whisper. Alex was silent for a moment. He had spent the last few days trying to find that answer. But the truth was that he already knew. He had already made his decision. Now I move on, he said firmly. Without you. Her eyes widened, and the panic on her face was almost tragic. No, Alex. We can overcome this. We can try. Please, I don't want to lose you. He shook his head. You've already lost me, Laura. She stood up, taking a tentative step toward him. I made a mistake, but I love you. It can't end like this. He looked away, feeling an immense weight in his chest. But he wouldn't give in. No more. This is over, Laura. What we had, what we were, you destroyed. And now you have to live with it. She sat down on the couch again, crying softly. But he didn't stay to watch. He turned and walked to the door, feeling his heart racing, but his mind lighter than it had been in days. As he opened the door, he felt the cool night air on his face. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was trapped in a life that was no longer his. He left, without looking back. And this time, there was no doubt. He wouldn't come back. The door closed behind Alex, and with it, everything that was once his life with Laura. The night air was thick, charged with a freedom he didn't yet know how to carry. His legs moved instinctively, his steps slow, as if part of him was still waiting to hear her voice calling, asking, begging for something he no longer had to give. But all that came was silence. The same silence that, for months, separated the two inside that house. Now, he finally understood, silence was the answer long before he even asked the questions. He got into the car, let his hands rest on the steering wheel, but didn't start the engine immediately. The weight of the night fell on him, and reality hit him like a punch. He was alone. Not because he wanted to, but because he had been put in that position. Because someone he trusted decided his loyalty was expendable. Laura said she loved him, that she regretted it, but true love is never destroyed by a wrong choice. What they had ended the moment she chose someone else. The house was left behind as he drove aimlessly, without a destination. Every traffic light, every empty street was a reminder of the time he spent trying to believe that everything was fine, when in fact, the world around him was already falling apart. The cell phone vibrated in the passenger seat. He knew who it was before he even looked. More messages, more desperate attempts to reverse something that was beyond repair. He picked up the device and, without hesitation, blocked the number. The days that followed were strange. Emptiness took over every moment, as if his life had been put on hold. Work was his first escape. He arrived earlier, left later, filled every second of the day with tasks that prevented him from thinking too much. But thoughts always found a way to reach him, especially in the sleepless mornings, when the silence of the temporary apartment in which he was staying enveloped him like a shadow. Laura tried to contact us in other ways. Emails, mutual friends, even showing up at his office in a last-ditch attempt to make yourself heard. He didn't give in. There was no more room for her words, because they meant nothing. She wanted a second chance, but some things are irreversible. Love can forgive, but respect, once destroyed, will never be the same again. The moral dilemma haunted him. How could someone who shared so much time by your side betray you like that? Was it, at some point, real? He fought the urge to find answers that, deep down, no longer mattered. He could spend his entire life trying to understand why she did what she did, but nothing would bring back what was lost. And so he decided to stop looking. A month later, the divorce papers were ready. He sat at the lawyer's table, signing each page without hesitation. The last signature sealed the final end, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace. Not joy, not satisfaction, but a silent acceptance that some things need to end for something new to begin. The day Laura received the documents, she tried again. Please don't sign yet. Let's talk, let's try. He looked at her, seeing the woman who was once his everything and who was now nothing more than a memory. There is nothing more to try. And then he was gone. For the last time. But life has strange ways of going on. The empty space that Laura left did not stay empty forever. Sometimes destiny pushes us down paths we never imagined. And that's how, without waiting, without looking, Alex met someone. It appeared simply, without promises, without expectations. At first, he resisted. He didn't want to open up again, he didn't want to risk feeling the pain he already knew so well. But she was different. His gaze was sincere, his presence was light, and little by little, without him realizing it, the armor he built began to crack. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to smile without effort, talk without fear, trust without distrust. The past no longer defined him. He wasn't just a betrayed man. He was someone who survived, who learned, who moved on. And as night fell and the cool wind touched his face, he finally understood. The pain, the betrayal, the end, all of that was necessary for him to get there. And for the first time, he felt ready for something new. Time passed in a blur. Alex went on with his life, but something inside him still echoed the last few months. He didn't talk about Laura anymore, he didn't let people mention her name. The divorce was finalized, the papers signed, the assets divided. He moved away from everything he could remember from the past, seeking a refuge in routine to move forward. But moving forward was not that simple. The unexpected meeting happened on an ordinary afternoon. He was in the cafe where he usually went to escape the silence at home, his eyes fixed on his laptop, but not actually reading anything that was on the screen. That's when he heard a female voice asking for coffee, and something in the soft intonation caught his attention. He looked up and saw a woman with her hair tied up carelessly, a tired expression on her face, but a polite smile upon receiving the attendant's order. Her eyes met his for an instant. Too small to be meaningful, but long enough to spark a spark. She picked up her coffee, looked around for an empty table, and, as if fate had decided for them, the only seat available was the one next to him. "Can I sit down?" He hesitated for a second before nodding. She sat down, took a book out of her bag and began to read, but he noticed that her eyes weren't paying attention to the words. "Tough day?" he asked, not sure why he felt the need to bring up the subject. She smiled sideways, without taking her eyes off the book. "Every day is." He laughed softly. "Believe me, I understand." That's how the conversation started. Nothing forced, nothing planned. Just two people sharing a space and, without realizing it, starting to share something else. Her name was Helena. He worked at a publishing house and, according to his own words, spent more time reading other people's stories than living his own. She had been divorced for 2 years and, like Alex, was learning to deal with the echoes of a past that didn't work out. The meetings became frequent, but without rushing. It was unlike anything Alex knew. There were no empty promises, no unrealistic expectations, no need to rush. Little by little, he realized that he liked the way Helena looked at him without judgment, without expectations. She didn't see him as a broken man, but as someone who was starting over. One night, as they were walking together after dinner, Helena stopped and looked at him. "Do you still think about her?" He knew exactly who she was talking about. Less than before, he admitted. "But yes. Some scars take longer to heal." She nodded, as if she completely understood. "I'm not in a rush for anything, Alex. I just want you to know that I'm here if you want to try something new." His heart quickened, not from fear, but from something different. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. "I want to," he replied, without hesitation. She smiled, and in that instant, he knew that, for the first time in a long time, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The months passed, and Helena's presence became something natural in her life. Dinners became full nights together, random conversations became sincere confessions. He realized that love didn't need to be a battlefield, it didn't need to be a game of uncertainty. It could be simple. It could be light. But the past never completely disappears. One afternoon, while working in his office, he received an unexpected email. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Laura. He hesitated before opening it, but curiosity got the better of him. Alex, I know it's too late to ask for forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I don't expect you to answer me, I just want you to know that I should never have lost you. I hope you're okay. Laura. He read the words once, twice, 3 times. Then, without thinking much, he deleted the message. He felt neither anger nor satisfaction. He just knew that it didn't affect him anymore. That night, when he met Helena, he held her hand tighter than usual. Everything is fine? She asked. He smiled, feeling lighter than ever. Yes. For the first time in a long time, everything is fine. The months passed and Alex no longer felt the weight of the past on his shoulders. Time had done its work, gradually erasing the pain that seemed unbearable at the beginning. The divorce was finalized, and he rebuilt his life in a way he never imagined possible. Helena became a constant, but what united them was not rush or need, but the tranquility of knowing that they had both learned from their scars. There were no demands, just a mutual understanding that new beginnings don't need to be rushed. But the past has a cruel way of finding those who try to move on. One morning, upon entering his office building, Alex felt a shiver run down his spine when he heard a familiar voice calling him. He turned slowly, as if not wanting to confirm what he already knew. Laura was there, standing, visibly thinner, her sunken eyes betraying sleepless nights. She was no longer the woman he knew, nor the woman who betrayed him. He looked like someone lost between his own choices. He didn't feel angry. He also felt no mercy. I didn't expect to find you here, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't expect to see you again, he replied dryly. She took a deep breath, crossing her arms as if trying to protect herself from the cold, but there was no cold that day. It was just his presence that made her uncomfortable. Alex, I need to talk to you. He looked at the clock. I think we've said everything we had to say. I lost everything, she blurted out, suddenly, as if those words were a weight she had been carrying for a long time. He remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The boss, he used me and discarded me. After he found out you filed for divorce, he walked away. He said he never promised anything, which I misinterpreted. He laughed in my face, Alex. He felt something inside him twist, but it wasn't pain. It was just stating the obvious. You chose him, Laura. He chose to end everything we had. I know, she whispered, her eyes teary. For a moment, he wondered what would have happened if she had made different choices. But then he remembered the pain, the betrayal, the nights he felt like a stranger within his own marriage. There was no turning back. I just wanted you to know that I regret it. In truth. He nodded, emotionless. I know. But regret doesn't change the past. She looked away, and he realized that this was the final end. No matter how much she suffered, no matter how many times she asked for forgiveness. Some choices cannot be fixed. He turned without saying anything else and entered the building, leaving Laura behind. That same day, he met Helena for dinner. Upon seeing her, he felt an immediate relief, as if the simple tenderness of being by her side proved that he had made the right choice in moving forward. Long day? She asked, noticing something different in his face. A ghost from the past has appeared, he replied, sincerely. She didn't ask anything else, just held his hand on the table, offering a smile that dispelled any trace of doubt that might still exist within him. That's where he wanted to be. That's where he belonged. Meanwhile, Laura returned to her empty house, where silence was her only company. There were no messages waiting for her, there were no missed calls, there was no one caring if she arrived or not. Loneliness was now his only answer, and regret his cruelest punishment. Time cannot be reversed. Choices made cannot be erased. And some betrayals come with a price that can never be paid. Now we want to know, what did you think of this story? Do you think Laura deserved this fate? Comment below and share your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And remember, betrayal never leads to anything but destruction.